As night falls over the Appalachian peaks, mist begins to creep through the towering trees, shrouding the ancient trails in an eerie embrace. Whispers echo through the cold wind, and shadowy figures lurk among the gnarled trunks. Is it merely a trick of the mind, or do restless spirits still wander, waiting for someone to uncover their buried secrets? Tom and Kate, the seasoned adventurers, are once again diving into a journey filled with spine-chilling mysteries. This time, they will explore the haunting legends of the Appalachian Trail, where unexplained disappearances, abandoned cabins hidden in the fog, and lingering ghosts continue to cast an ominous presence over the forest. Are you ready to embark on this thrilling adventure with them? Don't forget to subscribe. The Ghost on the Appalachian Trail. Tom revved the motorcycle engine, leaving behind the old office building where they had just confronted the ghosts of the past. The cold night air cut through their jackets, but both felt relieved to have escaped safely. Kate turned to Tom, her eyes still filled with contemplation. "Where do you think we're heading next?" she asked, her voice tinged with exhaustion. Tom gave a slight smirk, his sharp eyes fixed on the road ahead. "I heard about an interesting place in the Appalachian Mountains. There are rumors about mysterious disappearances around a small lodge on the trail. That might be our next stop." Kate nodded and pulled her scarf tighter against the wind. Their experiences had taught her one thing: no place was ever ordinary. And the Appalachian Mountains would surely be no exception. After a long day winding through the narrow roads of the Appalachian Mountains, Tom and Kate finally arrived at a small lodge near the trail. The wooden sign hanging at the entrance looked like it had been there for decades, its paint peeling away to reveal faded letters, "Mountain Rest Lodge." As they stepped inside, the lodge carried the scent of pinewood and dampness. At the front desk stood an elderly man with deep-set eyes and a strained smile. His name tag was worn, but it still read, Jeremiah. "Looking for a room?" he asked in a hoarse voice, as if he hadn't spoken much that day. "Yes, a double room," Tom replied, setting his backpack down. Jeremiah silently retrieved a key, but before handing it over, he hesitated, his eyes scrutinizing them carefully. You don't plan on walking around at night, do you?" he asked, his tone layered with an unspoken warning. Tom and Kate exchanged glances. This wasn't the first time they had heard strange warnings upon arriving at a new place. Kate raised an eyebrow, waiting for an explanation. "It's just," Jeremiah hesitated, lowering his voice, "strange things happen here. Some guests claim they've seen figures moving through the trees. Others say they hear footsteps following them. And some have gone missing." Tom smirked. "We've heard stories like this before, Mr. Jeremiah, but don't worry, we're not easily frightened." Jeremiah sighed but said nothing more. He slid the key toward them, as if washing his hands of any responsibility. Their room was on the second floor, a small yet cozy space with a window overlooking the endless stretch of forest. Outside, the sun had already dipped behind the mountains, leaving behind a deep indigo sky. Kate stared out the window. "I have a bad feeling about this place," Tom chuckled, sitting down on a wooden chair nearby. "To me, it just looks like an old lodge with a superstitious owner." But just as he finished speaking, a sudden gust of wind slammed against the window, rattling it violently. Kate flinched, and Tom frowned. That wind wasn't normal. It carried a chill that seeped into his bones. That night, despite Jeremiah's warnings, Tom and Kate decided to take a walk and explore the area around the lodge. They followed the Appalachian Trail, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as their footsteps crunched on the dirt path. "Do you feel like we're being watched?" Kate asked softly. Tom nodded silently. Since they had left the lodge, he had sensed something lurking nearby. The swaying tree branches cast eerie shadows under the moonlight, but something felt off. Then they saw her, a woman in a red coat, barefoot, standing just a few meters away. She didn't move, just stood there, staring at them. Kate tightened her grip on Tom's hand. "Do you see that?" Tom nodded, but as he took a step forward, the woman vanished before their eyes. No sound, no trace. What the hell just happened? Kate gasped. Taking a step back, Tom crouched down, inspecting the ground where she had stood. But there were no footprints, as if she had never been there. "We need to head back," he said quickly. "Something is seriously wrong here." They practically ran back to the lodge. As soon as they stepped inside, Jeremiah looked up at them, his face grave, as if he already knew. "You saw her, didn't you?" he asked in a low voice. Tom and Kate didn't answer, but their expressions said everything. Jeremiah sighed and pulled out a chair, motioning for them to sit. That was Sarah Lawson. Kate blinked. Sarah Lawson? She was a hiker who went missing 10 years ago. Jeremiah explained. She was one of the first to see something in those woods. And she never came back. Tom folded his arms, his expression serious. "What happened to her?" Jeremiah hesitated before speaking. "No one knows. But after she disappeared, people started seeing her ghost wandering the forest. Always in a red coat. Always disappearing before anyone could get close." Kate shivered, like a warning. Jeremiah nodded. "And if she appeared to you, it means she's trying to tell you something." Tom glanced at Kate, then back at Jeremiah. "Is there someone who might know more about her?" Jeremiah was silent for a moment before replying. "There is one person, a local historian. He might be able to help you, but be careful. If Sarah is appearing to you, it means something far worse is lurking in those woods." Tom and Kate exchanged a look. Once again, they had stepped into a mystery that would not be easy to escape. Tom and Kate made their way to the home of Harold Whitmore, a local historian who lived a few miles from the lodge. Harold was a man in his 60s, with silver hair and wary eyes. When they mentioned the name Sarah Lawson, he fell silent for a long moment before leading them into his study, filled with old books and faded photographs. "I suppose you've seen her already," Harold said, his voice hoarse. Tom and Kate nodded. Kate asked, "Do you know what happened to her?" Harold sighed, pulling out an old leather-bound journal. He opened to a page with a photograph of a young woman in a red coat. "Sarah came here in 2012. She was an experienced hiker, but she vanished mysteriously. Before she disappeared, she took a photograph of an abandoned cabin deep in the woods. It was the last picture on her camera. When they found her backpack, the camera was still there, but she was gone." Tom examined the photo. The cabin looked decrepit, its windows shattered, its wooden walls rotting. But what made his skin crawl was the faint outline of a figure standing in the upstairs window. "Where is this cabin?" Tom asked. Harold shook his head. "No one knows for sure. People claim to have found it, but when they return, it's gone. If you truly want to investigate, be careful." The next morning, Tom and Kate prepared to head into the woods. They packed maps, food, and survival gear. According to Harold, the cabin lay deep within the foggy hollow, an area known to be treacherous even for seasoned hikers. After several hours of trekking, the weather began to shift. A thick mist started to engulf them, reducing visibility. The sense of being watched grew stronger with each step. "Tom, I don't think we should go any further," Kate whispered, her voice uneasy. Tom squeezed her hand. "We've come too far to turn back now. We need to know the truth." And then they saw it. Through the dense fog, a cabin emerged, identical to the one in Sarah's photo. It looked decrepit, abandoned, yet eerily untouched by time. They cautiously approached and pushed open the wooden door, which creaked loudly. Inside, the air was thick and stale, the scent of rot clinging to the walls. Furniture covered in dust stood frozen in time, as if the place had been deserted in an instant. And then they heard it. Footsteps on the second floor. Kate held her breath. Is someone here? Tom shone his flashlight up the staircase. The beam of light swept across the landing. And there, standing at the top of the stairs, was a woman in a red coat. Sarah, Kate gasped. The woman said nothing. Slowly, she raised her hand and pointed toward a dark corner of the living room. Tom hesitantly stepped forward and looked down at the floor. Beneath layers of dust was a shallow grave, as if someone had dug and hastily covered it back up. Tom knelt and began digging. His fingers scraped against something solid. He pulled at it, revealing a small wooden box. Inside, he found a skeletal hand, still adorned with a silver bracelet. Kate recoiled in horror. Oh God, that's Sarah. Suddenly, the entire house began to tremble. The footsteps above grew louder, as if something, or someone, was charging down the stairs. We need to get out of here, Tom shouted. Kate grabbed the box, and they sprinted outside just as the cabin started to collapse. They ran through the thick fog, their breaths ragged, until they were sure they were safe. The next day, they handed the box over to the local authorities. When police excavated the area near the cabin, they discovered Sarah's entire skeleton. Forensic tests confirmed she had been murdered and buried over a decade ago. The strangest part? When the police returned later for further investigation, the cabin was gone. No sign remained that it had ever existed. Before leaving town, Tom and Kate stood at the edge of the forest. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves, and for a brief moment, they saw Sarah's spirit, or at least, the faint outline of her figure, standing among the trees. Smiling, she had finally been freed. Tom took Kate's hand. Let's go. Our journey isn't over yet. The motorcycle roared to life, carrying them toward their next adventure, where new mysteries awaited. The haunted house in Foggy Hollow Valley. The motorcycle roared as it sped away from the mist-covered Appalachian Trail, leaving behind the haunting memories of Sarah Lawson in the mysterious wooden cabin. Tom glanced at Kate through the rearview mirror, noticing her silence as she stared at the fading mountain ridges. He understood. Each journey left an unshakable mark on them. Are you all right? Tom asked, breaking the silence. Kate sighed, pulling her scarf tighter around her neck. I just keep wondering if those spirits are truly at peace now. Tom gripped the handlebars. We can never be sure, but at least we did what we could. They continued riding, their thoughts carried away by the wind. After a few hours on the road, as the sun climbed higher, they pulled over in front of a small roadside cafe. A weathered wooden sign hung loosely from the porch, Foggy Hollow Cafe. The cafe had an old-fashioned charm, with dark wooden walls and delicate lace curtains draping over its windows. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the crisp morning air, creating an atmosphere that was both warm and mysterious. Tom and Kate entered, choosing a table near the window. A middle-aged woman with graying hair brought them 2 steaming cups of coffee before unexpectedly speaking up. You two aren't from around here, are you? Her gaze was probing but not unfriendly. Kate nodded. We're just passing through, exploring the area. The woman smiled faintly. Then it's best you don't go too far, especially toward Foggy Hollow Valley. The name made Tom raise an eyebrow. Why? What's there? The woman set her tray down and pulled up a chair across from them. I suppose you haven't heard about the Harrison house. Kate traced the rim of her coffee cup, a chill running down her spine. No, we haven't, but from the way you say it, it doesn't sound like an ordinary place. The woman exhaled, staring out the window as if recalling something from long ago. The Harrison family lived there in the late 19th century. They were well off, but one day, they vanished without a trace. When people entered the house afterward, they found a fully set dining table covered in dust, with untouched food still sitting on the plates. as if they had just stepped away from dinner. Since then, no one dares go near it. Tom glanced at Kate and saw her face pale slightly. Sounds like a local ghost story meant to scare kids, but something must have made people believe in it so strongly. The woman nodded, lowering her voice. Those who dared to enter said they heard whispers. Some heard the cries of children. Others felt unseen eyes watching them, and some never returned. Kate shivered. So, the house is still standing? The woman gave a slow nod. It's still there, but if you're smart, you'll stay away. Tom placed money on the table and met her gaze. Thank you for the warning, but we have to go. The woman sighed but didn't argue. They stepped outside, the soft morning sunlight casting long shadows along the dirt road leading into Foggy Hollow Valley. Tom started the engine, but Kate remained still, staring down the path as if it whispered something only she could hear. Are you ready? Tom asked. Kate took a deep breath before climbing onto the bike. We're never really ready, are we? Tom smirked, then twisted the throttle. The motorcycle surged forward, leaving behind the eerie warnings and heading straight for the unknown. They rode for nearly an hour before reaching Foggy Hollow Valley. The landscape was more desolate and foreboding than they had imagined. Towering trees loomed overhead, their skeletal branches reaching like bony fingers toward the sky. The air was damp and thick with the scent of wet earth, as if the entire forest had been asleep for centuries. Finally, they saw it. The Harrison house stood at the heart of the mist, an ancient relic frozen in time. Its roof had partially collapsed, its windows shattered, yet it did not seem completely abandoned. Rather, it felt as if it was waiting for someone to enter. Kate swallowed hard. This is definitely the place. Tom checked his flashlight, then nodded. Let's go. Crossing the threshold, they were immediately struck by an overwhelming presence. The interior was exactly as described, a long dining table coated in dust. Yet the plates still held untouched meals, eerily preserved. This isn't possible, Kate whispered. A sudden gust of cold air swept through the room. Though every window was closed, whispers rose from the walls. Tom instinctively shone his flashlight around, but there was nothing, just the large mirror facing the dining table, and in it, a man stood behind Kate. Kate screamed and spun around. There was no one there. Tom grabbed her arm. We need to find out what happened here. They ventured deeper into the house, the sensation of being watched intensifying with each step. On a dusty bookshelf, an old leather journal sat half buried in cobwebs. Tom picked it up, flipping through its fragile pages. The ink had faded, but the words remained, chronicling the final, terrifying days of the Harrison family. Tom flipped through the brittle pages of the journal, each line scrawled in a hurried, uneven script. The final entries were particularly unsettling. We cannot leave. Every night, there's knocking at the door. But when we open it, no one is there. The children cry, but we do not know if they cry out of fear or because something else is listening to them. I see a tall figure lurking in the shadows, its eyes black as coal. We have made a terrible mistake moving here. Kate gripped Tom's arm. We should leave before nightfall. Just then, knocking echoed through the house. Both of them froze, their hearts pounding. The silence that followed was suffocating. Tom hesitated, then slowly approached the front door. Gripping his flashlight tightly, he took a deep breath and pulled the door open. No one was there, but the mist outside had thickened, swirling around the porch like a living thing. A cold wind rushed past them, carrying a faint whisper. Kate shivered. We need to go now. Tom turned back, but his flashlight beam caught something unusual, a hidden door in the floor, partially covered by a worn-out rug. He and Kate exchanged glances before pulling the rug aside. The iron handle of the hatch was ice-cold as Tom pulled it open. A narrow staircase led downward into absolute darkness. I don't like this, Kate murmured. Neither do I, Tom admitted. But if there's something down there that explains what happened to the Harrisons, we need to know. Taking cautious steps, they descended. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. At the bottom, they found a small, stone-walled room. Tom's flashlight revealed a freshly built brick wall, standing in stark contrast to the aged, crumbling surroundings. Kate took a step back, her breathing unsteady. "Tom, we shouldn't touch that." But Tom was already reaching out. He knocked on the bricks, and a hollow sound echoed. Without hesitation, he grabbed a nearby rusted pipe and struck the wall. A section crumbled, revealing a small hidden space behind it. Kate gasped. The skeletal remains of a child were bound with old rope, lying motionless within. A deep chill ran through their bodies. The realization was horrifying. The Harrison family never left. They were trapped here, murdered. Suddenly, every window and door upstairs slammed shut. A guttural laugh echoed through the basement, and in the dim light, a tall figure with empty black eyes emerged from the darkness. Tom instinctively positioned himself in front of Kate, gripping the flashlight like a weapon. The figure moved closer, its presence distorting the very air around it. Kate clutched Tom's sleeve. "Tom, we need to get out of here." The ground trembled as the entity took another step forward. Its hollow gaze locked onto them. "Run!" Tom shouted. They sprinted up the stairs. But as they neared the top, the hatch slammed shut, trapping them in complete darkness. Kate pounded on the door, while Tom turned to face the looming shadow. The presence seemed to suck the very light from the room, growing more monstrous with every passing second. Then, a weak cry echoed from behind them. Tom and Kate turned, finding a small, ghostly figure of a child standing within the broken brick wall. The child raised a hand and pointed at the dark entity, its expression sorrowful yet determined. A deafening shriek erupted as the entity recoiled, its form flickering violently. The basement door suddenly burst open. Tom grabbed Kate's hand, and they ran. As they escaped through the front door, the entire house began to collapse behind them, consumed by darkness and mist. They didn't stop running until they were far down the road. When they finally turned back, the house was gone. All that remained was an empty patch of land, covered in thick fog. Kate clutched her chest, gasping. "Tom, do you think the child's spirit was finally freed?" Tom remained silent for a long moment before nodding. "I think so, and maybe the Harrison family can finally rest." They stood there for a moment, letting the reality of what had happened sink in. Then, without another word, they returned to their motorcycle. This time, there was no need to discuss what came next. They simply started the engine and rode off into the mist, ready for the next mystery awaiting them. The Legend of the Faceless One. The motorcycle roared as it sped away from the misty valley of Foggy Hollow. Tom glanced at the rearview mirror, seeing Kate's gaze fixed on the empty land where the Harrison house once stood. They had left it behind, but the weight of what had happened in the dark basement lingered with them. Kate spoke softly. "Do you think it really disappeared?" Tom sighed, keeping his eyes on the road ahead. "I don't know, but if there are things beyond human understanding, maybe they have their own way of leaving when they no longer belong." They continued their journey, their thoughts carried away by the cold Appalachian wind. Night descended, and the dense fog wrapped around the towering trees, making the winding roads even more eerie. After hours of riding, they pulled over at a small tavern on the edge of the forest. The old wooden sign hung loosely from the entrance, with barely legible words, "Hunter's Rest." The tavern was sparsely occupied, with only a handful of men scattered around the wooden tables. The scent of burning wood and whiskey lingered in the air, mixing with the low murmurs of conversation. Tom and Kate stepped inside, scanning the dimly lit room. In one corner, A group of rough-looking men huddled together, speaking in hushed, serious tones. Kate nudged Tom. "Do you see them? They don't look like regular drinkers." Tom nodded and approached the bar. "2 glasses of whiskey, please," he said to the bartender, a middle-aged man with weathered features. The bartender poured the drinks but hesitated before handing them over. He studied them with a discerning look. "You're not from around here. First time stopping by?" Tom nodded. "Just passing through. But this place, it seems to have some history?" The bartender let out a dry chuckle, setting down their drinks. "Not the tavern, but the forest out there, yeah. If you don't have a damn good reason, best stay away." Kate raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Before the bartender could answer, one of the men from the corner spoke up. "Because there's something living in those woods, and it just took one of ours." Tom and Kate turned to face the man. He had the look of a seasoned hunter, grizzled beard, heavy jacket, and sharp, tired eyes. The other men at the table bore the same rugged appearance. These weren't superstitious villagers. They were people used to the dangers of the wild. Kate stepped closer. "You said someone went missing?" The man nodded and pulled out a chair. "If you don't mind hearing a bit of horror, have a seat. Name's Wallace, and we're hunters. But this time, we're not hunting an animal." Tom and Kate sat down as Wallace leaned in, lowering his voice. "Have you ever heard of the legend of the Faceless One?" Kate shivered. "Sounds like a campfire ghost story." Wallace gave a dry, humorless chuckle. "Maybe, but when our friend disappeared, it stopped being a legend." Tom frowned. "Who is he?" Wallace rested his elbows on the table, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "The Faceless One is a being that hunts those who stray too far into the forest. People say he has no eyes, no mouth, just a blank face. Yet he can still see, still hear. If you look at him, you'll never return." Another hunter in the group chimed in. "2 days ago, we lost one of our own, Ethan. He was experienced, not someone who would just get lost. But after we heard his scream, we only found his footprints stopping abruptly in the mud, like he was plucked out of existence." Kate felt a chill run down her spine. "And you believe it was the Faceless One?" Wallace nodded slowly. "We don't have a better explanation. But we're not letting Ethan disappear without a trace. Tonight, we're going into the woods. If you two are as fearless as you seem, you can come. But remember," he paused, his eyes darkening, "once you enter, don't ever look at him." Tom and Kate exchanged a glance. They had seen too much to dismiss this as mere folklore. And this time, they weren't alone. Tom nodded. "Then tonight, we go into the forest." Wallace smirked, but there was no amusement in his expression. "Let's just hope you won't be the next ones to vanish." The Appalachian forest was suffocatingly dark as Tom, Kate, and the hunting party moved deeper into the tangled wilderness. The air was damp and heavy, and the mist clung to the ground like ghostly tendrils. Wallace led the group, his rifle ready, while the others kept their flashlights pointed at the trail ahead. The only sounds were their cautious footsteps and the distant hoot of an owl. "This is it," Wallace whispered, stopping abruptly. "This is where Ethan's footprints ended." Tom crouched down, examining the ground. Just as Wallace had said, the tracks stopped abruptly, as if Ethan had simply vanished. There were no signs of struggle, no drag marks, no broken branches. It was as if he had been plucked from the earth. Kate scanned the trees, her stomach twisting with unease. "Do you see those carvings?" The group turned their flashlights upward. Scattered across the trunks were strange symbols, roughly etched into the bark. Some resembled faceless figures, others were nothing more than crude, slashing marks. "Jesus," one of the hunters muttered. "What the hell does this mean?" Before anyone could answer, a sound rustled behind them. Leaves crunched. A branch snapped. Everyone whirled around, weapons raised, flashlights darting in every direction. But all they saw was darkness. Then, a voice, weak, barely above a whisper. "Help me." The group froze. It was Ethan's voice. "Did you hear that?" one hunter gasped. Tom's grip tightened on his flashlight. "It's coming from everywhere." Wallace's face darkened. "Or it's leading us somewhere." Then, the footsteps began. Not one pair, dozens, moving through the trees, circling them. Shadowy figures flickered between the trunks, too fast to see clearly. Then, a blood-curdling scream. One of the hunters was yanked into the darkness. His flashlight tumbled to the ground, rolling in the dirt. "Run!" Wallace shouted. The group bolted through the trees. But no matter which way they turned, they always ended up back where they started. Then, they saw him, standing in the clearing, tall, unmoving, a faceless, towering figure. No eyes, no mouth, just a smooth, featureless void where a face should be. Even without eyes, it was staring at them. Tom felt his body freeze as an unbearable force pulled at his mind. His breath hitched, his limbs locked in place. He couldn't look away. "Don't look," Kate screamed, grabbing his arm and jerking him back. A hunter wasn't as lucky. He stared too long, his body stiffened, eyes widening in pure terror before he collapsed lifelessly to the ground. Tom snapped out of his trance, his heart hammering. "We need to get out of here. No matter which way we run, we'll just end up back here." Wallace growled, "It's playing with us." Then Tom saw something, a small, tattered notebook lying by a fallen tree. He dove for it, flipping through the pages. The ink was smeared, the paper crumbling, but he could make out fragments of writing. "I've been here since 1956. I saw him. I learned the truth. You must never look at him directly. If you do, you're lost. But he has a weakness. He can't stand the sight of himself." Tom's eyes widened. "A mirror. We need a mirror." Kate frantically reached into her bag and pulled out a small pocket mirror. She turned it toward the faceless one. The creature recoiled violently. For the first time, it shuddered, emitting a distorted, agonized wail. Its form twisted, the shadows around it writhing like something burning alive. The air rippled, and suddenly, it was gone. Silence fell over the forest. The oppressive weight lifted, the darkness seeming thinner. Wallace exhaled shakily. "Is it over?" Tom kept his eyes on the empty space where the creature had stood. "I don't think something like that can ever truly be gone. But for now, we're safe." The surviving hunters gathered, shaken but alive. "We lost 3 men tonight," one of them muttered, "but we made it out." Kate looked back at the trees. "Not all of us." The mist swirled gently, and for a brief moment, she saw a shadow in the distance, watching them. No eyes, no mouth, but still watching. Tom took Kate's hand. "Let's go." The motorcycle roared to life, cutting through the cold night air. As they rode away, the faceless figure remained, standing in the misty tree line, silently observing, waiting. The sun slowly rose over the Appalachian Mountains, yet the mist clung to the forest like a secret refusing to be revealed. Tom and Kate stood by their motorcycle, gazing into the darkness that had swallowed truths beyond their understanding. What they had witnessed on this journey, the ghost on the trail, the vanishing house in Foggy Hollow, and the faceless one lurking in the deep woods, was only a fraction of the mysteries this world still hides. And they knew their journey was far from over. Kate pulled her scarf tighter and gave Tom a knowing smile. "Where do you think we'll go next?" Tom adjusted his sunglasses, revved up the engine, and the roar of the motorcycle echoed through the misty morning. "Wherever the unexplained awaits, that's where we're heading. And you? Are you ready to